Hello and welcome back to Skyline. I'm Driti, Atri, and tonight, Mr. Donald Trump publicly challenges Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu. Iran fires missile. Israel responds with airstrikes. Well, the Houthis, they threaten one of the world's most important shipping routes. A private jet explodes during an emergency landing. New York City witnesses a shocking attack. And the United States may be preparing a dramatic geopolitical move in the Indian Ocean. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceasefire is under pressure. The whole West Asia is on the edge. And every new headline seems more dramatic than the last one. So let's start with it. In the first segment, can you imagine being one of America's most closest ally and suddenly being told that you don't get the final say? Well, that's exactly what happened when Mr. Donald Trump made one of his strongest comments yet about Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, he kind of declared that if the United States negotiates a deal with Iran, Israel will simply have to accept it. And then came the statement that instantly made global headlines. Mr. Trump said that I call all the shots. He doesn't call the shots. Can you think about how extraordinary that is? For decades, the US-Israel relations have been built on close cooperation. American presidents have traditionally worked alongside Israeli leaders on major security decisions. But Mr. Trump's remark, it suggests something different this time. He wants the entire world to know that Washington intends to remain firmly in control of negotiations with Tehran. What's even more remarkable is the timing here. These comments came just hours after Iran launched missile towards Israel. Here, many observers, they expected Israel to respond immediately and aggressively. Instead, reports suggest that Mr. Trump personally urged Mr. Netanyahu to hold back. Why? Because Washington fears a much bigger war this time. American officials do understand that one large Israeli retaliation, it could trigger another Iranian response. And that response, it could really trigger another Israeli strike. And suddenly the entire region, it could be pulled into a conflict that nobody can control. Here, Mr. Trump insists that diplomacy remains alive and has repeatedly said that military action alone cannot solve the Iran issue. Well, he believes a negotiated settlement, it remains possible despite the rising tension. But for Netanyahu, the whole challenge is very different. Israeli leaders argue that every attack must have consequences. Otherwise, deterrence weakness. This difference in approach, it is creating one of the most fascinating geopolitical debates in the world today. Now, is diplomacy stronger than military pressure, or does restraint invite more aggression? Well, the answer here, it could shape the whole future of Middle East. And yes, those missiles are exactly where our next story begins. Now here for the people across northern Israel, the day began with a sound that nobody wanted to hear. Air raid sirens. Iran launched missiles towards Israel, marking the first major missile attack since the ceasefire. And within seconds, emergency alerts flashed across the screens. Families rushed towards the shelters. Children were moved indoors. Security forces moved into emergency mode. Across the country, people watched the skies. In many cities, daily lives came at standby as the residents, they waited very anxiously for any sort of update. In the meantime, Israeli defense system immediately began intercepting the incoming threats. But officials, they later claimed that most missiles, they were either intercepted or they failed to reach the intended target here. But let's be honest here, videos circulating online appear to show explosions and impact. In fact, sparking fresh debate about the effectiveness of missile air defense system during a prolonged conflict. Here, military experts, they often remind us of one important fact. No defense shield is perfect. Every interception, it costs money. Every attack tests the readiness, and every missile launch increases the possibility of error. And every error, it has consequences. The bigger concern is what may happen next. If missile launches become more frequent, pressure will definitely build on Israeli leaders to respond. And if Israel responds, Iran could retaliate again. Now that dangerous cycle is exactly what diplomats are desperately trying to prevent. Regional governments, they are watching very nervously because even a limited conflict between Israel and Iran, it has the potential to disrupt the trade, energy supplies, and the security across the West Asia. What started as a single missile launch, it could quickly become something much larger. But Iran is not the only challenge that Israel is facing tonight. That's right. Just when the whole region thought that things couldn't become more complicated, another missile entered the picture. And this time it is from Yemen. Ladies and gentlemen, air raid alerts sounded across central Israel after Yemen's Houthi movement. They launched a missile towards Israeli territory. Well, the attack, it immediately reminded the entire world that the whole conflict, it is no longer limited to Iran and Israel. It now stretches across multiple countries and multiple armed groups. Now, the Houthis are not new. They are backed by Iran. They have transformed from a local Yemeni force into a major regional player. Well, over the years, they have developed long-range missiles and drone capabilities just to allow them to strike targets thousands of miles away. Their involvement, it means that Israel must now think about threats that are coming from multiple directions but simultaneously. Security planners, they cannot focus on one front alone, right? They must monitor activity in Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, all at the same time. Now, for military planners, this creates a lot of challenge. Well, for civilians, it creates anxiety, uncertainty. One day the threat comes from Iran, the next day it comes from Yemen. Every new battlefront, it stretches military resources and increases the chances of the whole escalation. The Houthis insist they are acting in support of Iran, though, against Israel. But their actions, they are now influencing the entire West Asia. Every launch creates new diplomatic headache and new security concern. Their growing involvement, it also increases fear that the whole conflict could evolve into a broader regional confrontation involving several armed groups operating across different countries. And yes, the Houthis, they were not just targeting Israel with missiles here. They were also targeting the global trade. Imagine if one announcement suddenly threatens one of the busiest shipping routes on the planet Earth. Sadly, this is exactly what happened when the Houthis declared what they called a complete ban on Israeli ships in the Red Sea. At first glance, this may sound like a regional issue. It is not. The whole Red Sea, it is one of the world's most important trade arteries. In fact, massive cargo ships carrying fuel, electronics, food, machinery, in fact, consumer goods, it travels through these waters every day. So when shipping companies feel unsafe, they change the course. So this means longer journeys across Africa. That means higher fuel cost. That means bigger insurance bill. That means delivery delays and eventually higher prices for the consumers around the globe. We have already seen major shipping companies reroute the vessels because of security concerns in the region, right? Such diversions, they can add few weeks to the shipping schedule and significantly increase the operating cost here. In the meantime, the Houthis argued that their actions, they are aimed at pressurizing Israel. But the economic impact, it extends far beyond the West Asia. European markets, Asian manufacturers, global energy suppliers all rely on uninterrupted maritime trade. So if attacks, they increase, supply chains could once again face major disruptions here. Investors and governments, they are watching these developments very closely because what happens in Red Sea, it affects far more than the regional politics. It affects the global economy. And yes, speaking of the energy prices, Mr. Donald Trump had a lot to say about that too. Mr. Trump, he believes that America has one massive advantage in this crisis, and that is energy. Speaking about Air Force One, Mr. Trump argued that the United States possesses more oil, gas, coal resources than any country on the planet. Well, he suggested that America is well positioned to handle disruption across the West Asia instability. In fact, he also pointed to the energy cooperation and future production increases as a reason for this kind of confidence. Mr. Trump, he repeated his long-standing position on Iran's nuclear ambition. His message blunt. He says that Iran will not be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon ever. According to Mr. Trump, pressure on Tehran will continue through diplomatic, economic and strategic needs. These comments really matters. Why? Because energy remains one of the biggest concern, wherever the conflict erupts in West Asia. Well, every missile strike, every military operation, every threat to the shipping route, it immediately affects the oil market. Investors watch every headline. Governments monitor every development. Consumers worry about the fuel prices here. Mr. Trump argued that despite all the fear of skyrocketing oil prices, markets have remained more stable than they were expected to. But let's be honest here. Let's move on to the analysts. They warn that stability can disappear quickly if the whole conflict expands further. Well, take the example of Strait of Hormuz. That remains one of the most important energy choke point in the world. And any disruption over there, it could have consequences. That too, immediate one for the oil exporting nation and energy importing economies alike. Let's talk about a routine flight, an emergency call, and then a disaster. A Gulfstream G200 private jet flying towards Texas, it encountered severe mechanical problems shortly after the departure. The pilot immediately declared an emergency and turned back towards the airport. In the meantime, air traffic controllers quickly cleared whole airspace and emergency crew rushed into position. Everyone, they hoped the aircraft would make it back safely. Well, for several minutes, the crew fought to save the aircraft. Every decision mattered over there. Every second counted. But the tragedy struck, and that too during the landing attempt, while the aircraft crashed and erupted into flames. In the meantime, videos shared on social media showed a massive fireball lighting up the runway while thick black smoke it rose into the sky. In the meantime, firefighters rushed towards the burning aircraft as emergency responders tried to contain the whole situation. In the meantime, the pilot and co-pilot, they lost their lives sadly. Authorities confirmed that no passenger were on board, preventing an even a bigger tragedy. Aviation experts say that incidents like this, it reminds us how unforgiving technical and mechanical failures can be. Modern aircrafts are built with multiple backup systems, but when something goes extremely and horribly wrong, pilots often only have a moment to react. Now, the investigators are examining everything: maintenance record, cockpit communication, and flight data, just to determine exactly what happened there. The aviation industry, it will closely monitor the finding because every accident, it offers a lesson, and that could be just the improvement. Future safety and safety measures. For now, the focus, it remains on honoring the two crew members who lost their lives while trying to bring the aircraft home. And yes, while investigators, they search for answers in the Caribbean, chaos was unfolding in the heart of New York City. Let's go to the US now. Millions of people, they pass through the Penn Station every single year, right? But few ever imagined it becoming a crime scene. But unfortunately, that's exactly what happened when a violent stabbing attack, it left 6 people injured inside one of America's biggest transportation hub. The whole incident triggered panic among the commuters. Witnesses, they described the scene of a lot of confusion as passengers, they rushed away from that particular area, while police officers, they sprinted towards the danger. In the meantime, emergency medical teams quickly arrived and treated the victims near the train platform. In the meantime, blood-stained areas were cordoned off while investigators, they collected all the evidence. Authorities, they detained a suspect and they began trying to just understand what motivated this whole brutal attack. The timing, it has made this whole incident even more alarming. New York is preparing to host major international events, including the NBA Final Games and the World Cup matches. Millions of visitors, they are expected to arrive in this city. Security was already a major concern over there, and this attack, it has only intensified those concerns. Here, officials say that all the victims, they are expected to survive, but the incident, it has kind of reignited the debate about public safety, mental health resources, and crime prevention in a major city. Penn Station, it serves hundreds of thousands of passengers every single day. So what happens there, it is just a reminder that even the busiest and most heavily monitored location, it can suddenly become scenes of the crisis. For many New Yorkers, it was another unsettling reminder that public safety that remains one of the city's biggest challenges. And yes, while New York focused on security, Washington is quietly looking at a teeny tiny island that could influence the global military strategy. Most of the people, they have never heard of Chagos Islands, but inside the military circles, they are considered priceless. Ladies and gentlemen, reports suggest that the White House is exploring options to secure long-term control over Diego Garcia, basically one of the most strategically important military facilities in the world. Well, located in the middle of Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia, it has served as a critical launch point for military operations, intelligence mission, and logistics support for decades maybe. Now, let me explain why this matters. It matters because geography matters in geopolitics. Well, the island sits in a location that allows military forces to quickly reach the whole West Asia, East Africa, and parts of Asia too. Well, during the conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, Diego Garcia, it played a very, very important role in supporting the operations. It remains one of America's most valuable overseas military assets. Now, reports suggest that Washington is examining alternatives involving sovereignty arrangements linked to Britain and Mauritius. The goal is simple here. Ensure that access to Diego Garcia, it remains secure regardless of any future political developments. Well, at a time when China is expanding its influence, tensions remain very, very high in Indo-Pacific, and conflicts continue across West Asia. Strategic locations like Diego Garcia that becomes more valuable than ever. This is not simply a story about an island. It is a story about global power, military reach, and future geopolitical competition. And when we connect all that story to everything else happening around the globe, a much bigger picture, it begins to emerge. Here's a question: a ceasefire only in name or not? That's right, let's take a step back and look at everything that we have discussed tonight. Mr. Trump, he publicly challenged Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu. Iran launched missiles, Israeli defense systems, they were activated. The Houthis, they opened another front in the conflict. Shipping routes faced new threats, oil markets watched nervously. A private jet, it exploded during an emergency landing. A stabbing attack, it shocked the entire New York City. And yes, Washington quietly explored ways to strengthen its strategic military footprint. Well, at first glance, these stories, they may look unrelated to you, but they all are connected by one common theme. That theme is instability. And that's all for tonight's Skyline, ladies and gentlemen, from Mr. Trump's warning to Mr. Netanyahu, to fresh missile attacks, global shipping threats, and a lot of rising tension across West Asia. The world is entering another uncertain chapter. Thank you for joining me. I'm Driti, Atri, and I'll see you in the next episode.